Two cops pull over an elderly black couple for matching a description, but what happens when their son shows up changes everything. Charles, slow down a little. You know how they are out here. Loretta's voice trembled just enough for Charles to glance at her. He was gripping the wheel, his knuckles pale against the cracked leather steering cover, but his tone stayed calm. I'm doing the limit, Loretta. Ain't nothing wrong with how I'm driving. The sun was dropping low over Huntsville, Alabama, painting the asphalt gold. Sunday afternoon, church clothes still on. Their Cadillac, old but spotless, rolled along the two-lane stretch lined with pines and half-acre lots. This road had always been peaceful for them. Always. But today felt different. Loretta peeked in the side mirror again, then back at Charles. They've been behind us for 4 blocks now. Charles didn't answer right away. He just adjusted the rear view and saw the same thing she did. A patrol car, headlights sharp, even in daylight, trailing just close enough to make its presence felt. His jaw clenched, but his voice stayed even. Maybe they're just on the way somewhere. Loretta shook her head, clutching her purse tighter. Somewhere behind us? Charles? The silence in the car was heavier than the gospel CD still playing low in the background. The chorus of "His eye is on the sparrow" felt almost mocking now. Charles tried to force a smile, tried to make his wife feel safe. We ain't done nothing wrong, baby, just stay calm. But deep down, he knew what she knew. In this part of Alabama, being in the right didn't always mean you were safe. 2 more blocks. The patrol car was still there. Loretta's breathing grew shallow. Charles flicked on his signal early for the next turn, hoping to show courtesy, hoping to show something, anything, to keep things smooth. Blue lights flashed behind them. The siren gave a quick pop. Loretta's heart sank. Lord, please, she whispered under her breath, pressing her palms together like she was back in the pew. Charles guided the car to the shoulder, gravel crunching under the tires. He killed the engine, hands already at 10 and 2, like he'd been taught. Like every black man in America had been taught. Stay in your seat. Don't move too fast. And keep your voice steady, Charles muttered to Loretta without looking at her. His eyes were fixed on the side mirror where the patrol car had stopped, doors still closed. Loretta's voice was barely a whisper. Why us? We just came from church. Charles swallowed hard, watching as 2 figures finally stepped out of the car, both officers, both moving slow, deliberate, like a scene out of a bad dream. One adjusted his belt, the other touched the brim of his hat. The Sunday sun didn't feel warm anymore. It felt sharp. But Charles didn't know. This was only the beginning. The sound of boots on gravel drew closer. Charles kept his hands locked on the steering wheel, his pulse thudding in his ears. The first officer, tall and broad-shouldered, leaned down at the driver's window. His nameplate read, Reed. His mirrored sunglasses hid his eyes, but Charles could feel the weight of that stare. License and registration, Reed said, his tone clipped, almost impatient. Charles nodded slowly, keeping his movements exaggerated so there'd be no misunderstanding. Yes, sir. My wallet's in my back pocket. Registration's in the glove box. I'm reaching now. Reed didn't respond, just stood there, jaw tight, hand resting on his holster, like a reflex. Loretta shifted nervously in her seat. Officer, is there a problem? Ma'am, Reed cut her off without turning his head. I'll speak to your husband first. The second officer, a younger man with sandy hair and a sharp jawline, Officer Blake, moved to the passenger side. He tapped the glass with his knuckle. Ma'am, can you roll your window down? Loretta's hands shook as she pressed the button. Yes, sir. Blake crouched slightly, peering in with an odd smile. Where are you 2 headed this afternoon? Home, Loretta answered softly. We were just at church. Blake's eyebrows arched, like the answer amused him. Uh-huh. Which church? St. Luke's Baptist, Loretta replied. Charles handed over his license and registration. Reed studied them longer than necessary, then looked back at Charles. You live around here? Yes, sir. On Willowbrook Drive, off Governor's Drive. Reed glanced back at the patrol car, then at Blake. A silent exchange passed between them, the kind that says everything without a word. Mr. Gaines, Reed finally said, your vehicle matches the description of one involved in a burglary earlier today. Charles blinked, stunned. Burglary? Officer, this is my car. I've had it for 20 years. We'll see about that, Reed replied, voice flat. Loretta gripped her husband's arm, whispering, "Charles, what is this? We haven't done nothing." "Ma'am," Blake interrupted again, tone sharper this time. "I need you to keep your hands where I can see them, both of them." Loretta raised her trembling hands slowly, like someone in a robbery. The irony wasn't lost on her. Charles took a deep breath. "Officer, you have my ID. You see we're not—" Reed leaned closer, his shadow stretching across the dashboard. "Sir, don't make this harder than it has to be. Just cooperate." Something in his voice wasn't about procedure. It was about power. Loretta's lip quivered. Charles could feel her panic without even looking at her. He forced his voice calm, steady, like a man walking a tightrope. "Officer, I am cooperating, but I need to understand what you're accusing us of. We've done nothing wrong." Reed stared at him for a beat too long, then stepped back slightly. "Step out of the car." Loretta gasped. "What? No, why?" "Ma'am," Blake snapped, "calm down." Charles's hands tightened on the wheel. He could feel Loretta trembling beside him. He thought about the headlines he'd seen too many times. He thought about his son, and he prayed that text Loretta was about to send would reach him in time. But the worst part hadn't even started yet. Charles stepped out slowly, hands still raised chest high, moving as if the air itself had turned to glass and might shatter with the wrong motion. "Turn around," Reed ordered, voice clipped like the crack of a whip. Charles obeyed, feeling the warm Alabama dust grind beneath his polished church shoes. Behind him, he heard Loretta's shaky breath. "Sir," Charles began carefully, "I know my rights. You don't have consent to search my car." Reed smirked faintly, the kind of smirk you can hear without seeing. "Sir, I have probable cause." "For what? Coming home from church?" Charles asked, voice tightening despite his effort to keep it steady. "Sir, don't get smart with me." Reed moved closer, patting down Charles's pockets with rough, deliberate slaps. "You fit the description." Charles clenched his jaw. "What description is that exactly? Black man driving a Cadillac?" Reed's silence was answer enough. On the passenger side, Blake leaned in through Loretta's open window, eyes sweeping the dashboard, the seats, the glove box. "Officer!" Loretta's voice cracked like old wood. "You can't just—" "Ma'am," Blake said sharply, "for your safety and ours, I need you to stay calm and keep your hands where I can see them." Loretta's hands trembled in the air, fingers spread like broken wings. "Sir, step back toward my car," Reed barked. Charles did as told, slow steps crunching on gravel. His heart slammed against his ribs with every movement, but his voice stayed low, even, like a man praying silently. Reed guided him to the rear bumper of the patrol car. "Stay put." Back at the Cadillac, Blake had the glove box open now. Papers scattered across the passenger floor mat, insurance, registration, an old church program. Loretta watched, helpless. "Officer," she whispered, voice trembling so hard it barely held shape. "Please, that's my husband's car. That's all his things. You don't need to do this." Blake didn't even glance at her. "Ma'am, where are you two coming from again?" "I told you, St. Luke's," she said, eyes glistening. "We've gone there 30 years. Blake picked up the church program, turned it over in his hand like it was evidence. Then he tossed it back on the seat with a grunt. Outside, Reed stepped closer to Charles. "So tell me, why'd you seem so nervous back there?" Charles looked at him, calm but burning inside. "Because, officer, I've lived long enough to know what happens when a man like me meets a man like you." For a moment, Reed's jaw tightened, like the truth stung. Then his voice came sharp again. "Stay quiet." Charles caught Loretta's eyes through the windshield, wide, wet, pleading. She mouthed something he could barely read, but he knew what it was. "Call him." Loretta's hands inched down toward her lap, slow, like a leaf floating on still water. Her fingers brushed her phone inside her purse. Her heart slammed. If Blake saw her, he'd... But Blake was still rifling through the car. Loretta slid the phone out, her breath trapped in her chest. She tapped the screen with trembling fingers. The name flashed. Damien. She hit call. One ring, two. Then... "Ma?" The voice was low, firm, alert. Loretta's throat closed up. She whispered, barely audible, "Baby, they stopped us." On the other end, silence for half a second. Then, "Where?" Her eyes darted to the street sign. Oakwood and 53. I'm coming, Damien said. No hesitation, just certainty. Loretta hung up, her pulse wild. She looked at Charles through the glass. His eyes said it all. Hold on, just hold on. But by the time Damien got there, the fire was already burning. The heat hung heavy, sticking to Charles's skin like guilt that wasn't his. Reed paced a slow circle, like a wolf deciding where to bite. Blake slammed the Cadillac's trunk shut, his expression tight with something that looked like annoyance, or maybe disappointment that he hadn't found anything. Clean, Blake muttered to Reed as he walked back around. Reed grunted, then turned on Charles. So you're telling me you've got nothing to hide? That why you looked so nervous? Charles's voice was steady, but each word was pulled through clenched teeth. I told you, we were coming from church. You've got my ID. You've got my registration. What more do you need? Reed stepped closer, his boots crunching the gravel like broken glass. You got a problem with how I'm doing my job? No, sir, Charles said, holding Reed's gaze. I've got a problem with you trying to humiliate me in front of my wife. For a moment, neither man moved. The air between them buzzed with something dangerous. Blake shifted uneasily, fingers brushing the edge of his duty belt like he was waiting for an excuse. Inside the car, Loretta pressed her lips tight to keep from crying out. She slid the phone back into her purse, her heart racing so hard it made her chest ache. Damien's voice still echoed in her head. I'm coming. Reed, Blake said, voice low. Dispatch just radioed. They said, not now, Reed snapped, eyes locked on Charles. Blake hesitated, then stepped back. Sir, Reed said slowly, I could take you in right now. Obstruction, non-compliance. Want to test me? Charles's nostrils flared, but his voice didn't rise. You want to arrest a 78-year-old man for driving home from church? Go ahead, make that call. Reed's jaw twitched. His hand hovered near his holster now, not gripping it, but close enough to send a message. Loretta couldn't take it anymore. She cracked the passenger door and stepped out, her knees shaking under the weight of fear. Please, just let us go. We didn't do anything. Ma'am, get back in the car, Blake barked, striding toward her. Loretta flinched, clutching her purse to her chest like it could shield her from all this madness. Please, she whispered, tears streaking down her cheeks. Charles's stomach knotted as Blake reached her, grabbing the door and shoving it shut with a slam that made her jump. Don't touch my wife, Charles snapped, stepping forward. Reed's hand shot up, palm out like a stop sign. Move one more inch, old man, and you're going down. For the first time, Charles felt his voice tremble, not from fear, but from the weight of it all. The years, the warnings, the stories he thought he'd never star in. Then, from behind them, came the deep growl of an engine. Tires hissed against the gravel shoulder. A black Ford F-150 eased to a stop. The door swung open hard enough to rattle. A tall figure stepped out, boots hitting the ground like war drums. Broad shoulders, close-cropped hair, a posture that spoke of discipline and control. Damien Gaines. He didn't run, he didn't shout. He just walked, calm, measured steps that carried more authority than any badge on that road. His eyes locked on his father first, then flicked to Reed and Blake with a cold, steady fire. Is there a problem here? His voice wasn't loud, but it carried weight, the kind that makes men think twice before answering wrong. Reed turned, his expression tightening like a rope pulled too far. Who are you? Damien didn't blink. The man you don't want to push right now. And that's when the real storm began to gather. The gravel crackled under Damien's boots as he closed the distance between himself and the two officers. His presence hit like a shift in the atmosphere, calm but commanding, like a soldier walking into enemy territory. Sir, I asked you a question, Reed said, his voice dropping lower, trying to regain control. Who are you? Damien stopped just a few feet away. His eyes never left Reed's. Name's Damien Gaines. That's my mother in that car. That's my father standing here, hands in the air like a criminal. Somebody explain why. Blake's jaw tightened. Sir, this is a police matter. I need you to back up. Damien didn't even look at him. No, you need to answer me. Reed squared his shoulders. Your parents were stopped because their vehicle matched a suspect description in a burglary. Now step back before this turns into obstruction. Damien tilted his head slightly, like he was measuring each word before letting it drop. You searched their car already? That's none of your... You searched their car, Damien repeated, voice firm but calm. You found anything? Reed didn't answer. The silence was heavier than the summer heat. Damien took one slow step forward. Thought so. Reed's fingers twitched near his belt. Sir, I'm warning you. You think I'm scared of your warning? Damien's voice sharpened, not in volume but in precision, like steel slicing air. You put your hands on my father? You shoved my mother's door? For what? A car that matches a description? That's your excuse? Blake shifted uneasily, eyes darting between Reed and Damien. His tone softened, almost offensive. Look, man, we're just doing our job. Your job, Damien cut him off, eyes like stone, is to protect, not intimidate. Your job is to serve, not humiliate. So, which part of that job makes my mother cry in a car while you toss her glove box like a thief? Loretta's tear-streaked face peeked through the window, and for the first time, Blake's eyes dropped to the ground. Reed, though, doubled down. His chest puffed, his voice hardening like concrete. Sir, you need to leave before this becomes an arrest. I won't tell you again. Damien's lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. It was colder than that. You're gonna arrest me? Go ahead, make that call. But before you do, understand this. He pulled something from his back pocket and held it up, not a weapon, but a wallet. Inside, a Marine Corps ID glinted under the afternoon sun. I've spent the last 8 years serving this country so men like you could wear that badge without fear. And this is how you treat my parents? Reed froze, his jaw working like a machine grinding gears. Blake swallowed hard, shifting his weight. Damien's voice dropped lower, quieter, but deadlier. Now, we can do this 2 ways. You make this right, and we all walk away. Or you keep pushing, and I promise you, every camera in this county will know your names before sunset. Reed opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Behind them, a car slowed on the road, a phone held up from the driver's seat. Recording. The tension snapped like a live wire. Blake noticed first. Reed, he murmured, nodding toward the car. Reed's eyes flicked to it, then back to Damien. For the first time, his confidence cracked. But Damien wasn't done yet. Damien stepped closer, closing the last few feet until he stood eye to eye with Reed. The silence between them stretched tight like a wire ready to snap. You've got 30 seconds, Damien said softly, his voice steady, controlled. 30 seconds to explain why you pulled 2 elderly people off the road, tossed their car, and threatened my father for asking questions. Reed's jaw flexed, the muscle in his temple twitching. He glanced briefly toward Blake, who now looked less like a cop and more like a man praying this would end without a headline. We had probable cause, Reed said finally, his tone defensive, but not as sharp as before. A vehicle matching this description was involved in a burglary earlier. Damien cut him off with a low laugh. Probable cause? You searched the car and found nothing. You ran their IDs, didn't you? Reed didn't answer. Of course you did, Damien pressed. And you came up empty. So what's the reason now? You need to justify your little power trip? Blake took a step forward, palms out slightly. Sir, listen, maybe things got a little heated, but we can calm this down. Damien's eyes shifted to Blake, sharp enough to slice through his words. Calm it down. My mother's in tears. My father's standing here like a suspect in his own town. You don't get to calm it down after you've humiliated them. Loretta pushed the passenger door open again, her voice breaking as it carried across the gravel. Damien, baby, please, let's just go. He turned, and for a split second, his face softened, but when he looked back at the officers, the steel returned. You hear that? Damien said, pointing toward the car. That's a 76-year-old woman begging for peace after you shattered her Sunday. If you've got any ounce of decency left, you're going to apologize to her right now. Reed scoffed, but it was thin, like paper tearing in the wind. We don't owe anyone an apology. We were doing our job. Damien stepped in, so close, their chests nearly touched. His voice was ice. Doing your job doesn't mean stripping people of their dignity. Doing your job doesn't mean making a grandmother cry. But if that badge gives you the idea you can terrorize whoever you want without consequences, you picked the wrong family today. Blake's Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed hard. The car still parked on the road was filming, and now another vehicle slowed behind it. Phones were out, 2 cameras, maybe 3. "Reed," Blake said under his breath, nervous now. Reed looked at the growing audience, then back at Damien. The fight in his eyes flickered. Finally, he stepped back. "Sir, you're free to go." Damien's jaw tightened. "Not good enough." Reed's nostrils flared. For a long moment, the air was thick with pride and rage. Then through gritted teeth, he muttered, "Ma'am, I'm sorry for the inconvenience." Loretta's lip quivered. Charles slid an arm around her shoulder, holding her up like a pillar. Damien nodded slowly. "Now apologize to him too." Reed's glare could have burned through stone. "Sir, I'm sorry." Charles didn't speak. He just looked Reed dead in the eye, decades of quiet endurance weighing behind his stare. "Good," Damien said finally. "Now get in your car and leave." Reed hesitated, but Blake tugged his sleeve. Without another word, they turned and walked back to the patrol car. Damien stood there, chest heaving like he'd just stepped out of combat, watching until those flashing lights disappeared down the road. He turned back to his parents. Loretta was crying softly now, her face buried against Charles's shoulder. Charles kept his arm tight around her, his eyes wet but hard. Damien walked over and knelt so he was level with them. His voice dropped to a whisper. "I'm sorry you had to go through that. Both of you." Loretta cupped his face with trembling hands. "You got here just in time." Damien glanced down the road where the patrol car vanished, then back at his parents. "No, Ma, I got here late. It should have never happened." But Damien knew this wasn't the end. It was just another chapter in a story too many families knew too well. The road was quiet now, except for the faint hum of cicadas hiding in the trees. The tension that had gripped the air began to loosen, but it didn't disappear. It hung there, heavy and sour, like smoke after a fire. Damien opened the back door of his truck. "Come on, Ma, Dad, let's get you home." Loretta hesitated, glancing back at the Cadillac. "What about the car?" "I'll drive it after," Damien said. "Right now, I just need you both safe." Charles helped Loretta up slowly. Her legs felt weak, and Damien slipped an arm under hers, holding her steady like she was fragile glass. She had never felt this small before, not even in her hardest years. As they reached the truck, Loretta turned her tear-streaked face toward her son. "Baby, thank you. If you hadn't come..." Her voice cracked and she couldn't finish. Damien squeezed her hand gently. "I told you I'd always protect you, Ma. Always." Charles climbed in next, moving slower than usual. His eyes weren't just tired, they were heavy, like the weight of decades pressed on his shoulders all at once. Damien shut the door and leaned against the truck for a moment, staring down that empty road. He saw nothing but trees and asphalt, but in his mind, he saw every headline he'd read in the past 5 years, every video clip that ended in someone's blood on the pavement. He let out a breath that burned on the way out. "I've faced enemy fire, Ma," he said quietly once he slid into the driver's seat. "I've seen combat, but I've never felt fear like I did getting that call from you." Loretta looked at him with tired eyes, her fingers clutching the cross that hung from her neck. "Baby, you shouldn't have to fight here at home too." Damien didn't answer right away. He just started the truck and pulled onto the road, the sun dipping lower behind them. Then finally, he spoke. "People talk about freedom," he said softly. "But what good is freedom if you can't even drive home from church without being treated like a criminal?" Charles stared out the window, his voice low but firm. "That's why you live with dignity, son. Even when they try to strip it away, they can't take what you refuse to give." Damien nodded slowly, gripping the wheel tight. His father's words sank deep like roots finding soil. As the truck turned onto Willowbrook Drive, Damien glanced at his parents, 2 people who had carried him through life, now needing him to carry them through this moment. And he made himself a silent promise. This would not break them. Not tonight. Not ever. The truck rolled down the driveway as the sky turned to gold, but the fire inside Damien didn't cool. It burned, not with rage, but with resolve. Because this wasn't just about his family. It was about every family who had ever been pulled over and prayed to make it home alive. And Damien knew one thing for sure. As long as he had breath in his body, he would fight for a world where no mother had to cry behind a steering wheel again. What happened on that roadside wasn't just a traffic stop. It was a reflection of a problem that runs deep. No one should be treated as guilty just for existing. Respect, dignity, and accountability aren't favors. They're rights. If this story moved you, share it. Talk about it. Stand up when you see wrong, because silence isn't peace, it's permission, and the world doesn't change until we do.